Welcome back. Thanks very much for staying on with us here on WION World is One. You're watching WION Fineprint with me, Molly Gambhir. A quick look first at the top stories that we are tracking at this hour. A Ukrainian negotiator says a meeting between Vladimir Putin and Volodymyr Zelensky is possible as the second round of talks between the two sides concludes in Istanbul. The next round of talks to take place in 7 days. Russia says it will radically reduce its military activity in northern Ukraine, including near the capital Kiev, after what it calls meaningful talks in Istanbul. French President Emmanuel Macron faced voters worried about their incomes and rising energy prices as he hit the campaign trail less than 2 weeks to go for the polls. Ahead of the no-trust vote, Imran Khan's minister Asad Omar says the Pakistan Prime Minister is ready to share the letter containing proof of a foreign-funded conspiracy to topple his government. London police to issue at least 20 penalty notices as part of their investigation into the illegal parties held at the Prime Minister's residence and office during the COVID-19 lockdown. France will go to the polls on the 10th of April to elect a new president. Until last year, the presidential race was supposed to be a tight battle, but the war in Ukraine has changed a lot for the French President Emmanuel Macron. With over 10 days to go for the election, Macron's position looks formidable. His popularity has soared, especially because of the Ukraine war. Since the start, Macron has been at the center of the conflict. He's been trying to broker peace, talking to both Russian and Ukrainian sides, and prioritizing Europe's security and concerns. The incumbent is taking his claim for a second term. Macron became France's youngest president in 2017. He runs a centrist political movement to challenge traditional parties, but Macron has had to face problems to push his controversial reforms. In 2018, he was forced to scrap a proposed fuel tax after weeks of Yellow Vest demonstrations. Currently, Macron has a strong chance of winning. He is way ahead of all his rivals in the polls, with many looking at him as a global statesman.
Moi, je me bats pour le projet qui est le mien, pour cette vision qui est celle de l'unité de la France. J'ai essayé de la maintenir pendant ces 5 années. On sait les difficultés, les divisions qui sont là. On ne les a pas toutes corrigées. Je suis très lucide. C'est aussi pour ça que je veux continuer à m'engager. On a également, je crois, un projet d'avenir, là où beaucoup d'autres sont dans la nostalgie. Moi, je pense que la France ne réussira pas par ces divisions.
The second key player in the contest is Marine Le Pen. She is the leader of France's far-right National Rally, a party that her father, Jean-Marie Le Pen, founded in the early 1970s. The then National Front was considered to be a racist and anti-Semitic party, but Marine Le Pen excluded her own father from the party in 2015. Le Pen calls the party a protector of French values. She has a strong anti-immigrant, anti-European Union message. But what got her in trouble was her close link to Vladimir Putin. With public opinion being overwhelmingly against the Russian president, she has been seeking to distance herself from the leader. The case is somewhat similar with far-right challenger Eric Zemmour. He came into the political scene in 2021, slamming both immigration and Islam. He is even more nationalistic than Marine Le Pen. In fact, he had called for a ban on all first names that are not French. In 2018, he even said that he dreamt of a French Putin, quote-unquote. Zemmour is not a very likable personality in French politics. He once got egged during the presidential campaign as well. The next time, he had water bottles raining on him.
Attention. Attention.
The stakes are particularly high for both Le Pen and Zemmour this time around. Opinion polls, in fact, showing they could scoop about a third of the votes. The other key players are Jean-Luc Mélenchon, Valérie Pécresse, and Yannick Jadot. Jean-Luc Mélenchon is the strongest candidate on the left. He is a staunch critic of Emmanuel Macron and has been a prominent supporter of the Yellow Vest protests. He even wants France to leave the NATO. On the other hand, Valérie Pécresse represents the moderate right-wing Republicans in France. As for Yannick Jadot, he is standing for the Greens. The election process is a simple one. 2 rounds of voting will be held 14 days apart. The first round will be taking place on the 10th of April. If one candidate gets over 50% votes, they will be elected as president. If no candidate gets over 50% votes, the 2 candidates with the most votes will be going forward. A second round of elections will then be held on the 24th of April. Whoever wins that will be elected to power. The latest polls indicating that Macron will be securing nearly 27% of the votes in the first round. Marine Le Pen is likely to get 21% of the votes. This would lead to a Macron-Le Pen second round runoff. That's a repeat of the 2017 presidential election. As of now, the biggest issues, including the war in Ukraine, of course, France's economy, immigration policies, the country's security as well. The strong recovery of the French economy is likely to benefit Macron. As for immigration, it features extensively in the far-right's campaign. Far-right leaders have even promised a zero immigration policy. Also, with France having suffered several terror attacks in the last few years, security remains an important and crucial issue. And with us on the broadcast is Morgan Ferd-Malka, a political analyst joining us from Paris. Thanks very much for being here with us. How do you assess the impact that the Ukraine war has had on the French presidential battle? Macron tried to play peacemaker and clearly failed, but to what extent are his efforts in that direction boosting his prospects to return to power?
First of all, I truly hope that his efforts are going to have a true impact on the actual improvement of the situation in Ukraine and the improvement of the diplomatic situation with Russia. I think that everyone hopes that. But in terms of how his diplomatic activity has impacted his own image at home, I would not be as I don't think it is as clear-cut as it is sometimes presented in the media. Emmanuel Macron's activism abroad has not made him more popular among French people. I think that French people have been extremely divided about Macron since the Gilets jaunes, the Yellow Vest crisis and the pandemics. And this has not changed. And people who have polarized against Macron are still against Macron. So he has not won any sympathy. However, there is this mechanical rally towards the safest positions because of the atmosphere of uncertainty created by the war. So mechanically, the war in Ukraine is benefiting Macron in the polls because you don't change a captain in the middle of the storm. You don't change a general in the middle of a war. But in terms of his image in a long-term perspective, I don't think that the impact is as great as one might have hoped.
If you can dissect for us what the latest polls are suggesting at this point, how strong is the possibility of a Macron-Le Pen second-round runoff, which would be a repeat of the 2017 presidential election?
It would be a repeat of the 2017 election, but not only, it would be a repeat of several elections that have since 2002, actually. Of course, the probability is very high, but I wouldn't dismiss the possibility that Mélenchon would actually replace Marine Le Pen in the second round. There are several elements that have to be taken into account besides the traditional opinion polls. The one is that besides traditional media, we now have an election that is playing also on YouTube and on social media, with some studies showing that Macron and Le Pen and the strongest candidates are very low in the polls on those alternative platforms and in these alternative informational spaces. So, of course, this is to be taken with a grain of salt, but on YouTube, it's Mélenchon and Zemmour who are leading the race. So this is to be taken into account. Secondly, the poll that you're referring to, the latest poll by Ipsos, shows that the voting intentions towards Macron and Le Pen are very strong, not only in terms of how many people want to vote for them, but also how sure they are to vote for them. As regards all the other candidates, we have very fluctuating figures. So people are not sure who they're going to vote for. And the battle that is playing right now is the battle for the so-called useful vote or a non-useful vote. That is to say that Jean-Luc Mélenchon, the left-wing candidate, is trying to gather people around the idea of voting useful. Do not vote for the several left-wing candidates that there is. Vote for me because I'm the one with the greatest chance to come through to the second round. And if that happens, then Mélenchon has a chance to be against Macron at the second round.
You spoke earlier of the limited impact that the Ukraine war has had, according to you, on Macron's popularity on the ground. What are the issues then, the factors that are working in his favor at this point in time?
In his favor, so I would say perhaps the thing to pay attention to is the factors that are important to French people, and those factors are as everywhere. It is purchasing power and security. On those two issues, Macron has he is a polarizing figure. So what has worked for him with his constituency works against him with the people who are decided not to vote for him. So in that regard, the economic situation, you were mentioning earlier that the French economy has seen a strong recovery. This is a strong recovery that has been felt in some sectors of the population, not in all. And there are huge swathes of this French population who are very unhappy with the way that living standards are going down and life is becoming more expensive, which is not made easier by the Ukraine crisis and the rising prices for gas and electricity. The second issue is safety and security. And in this sense, I think that the most immediate dossier is not about immigration or terrorism, but the most immediate issue that everyone is talking about right now in France is Corsica. We have this region, Corsica, with very strong regional identity, which for decades has been talking about maybe getting more independence from the mainland. It is an island, so from the mainland. And this is a very, very difficult issue. Corsica has seen some domestic terrorism, and lately there has been a surge in violence on Corsica because of a very intricate story, an assassination of a Corsican militant in prison. Right. And this is something that is taking a lot of attention. So as always, you have to take into account the domestic factors, what is closest to people, the price of the bread, and the feeling of security.
Right. Morgan Fatmaka, appreciate very much for joining us on the broadcast and helping us better understand what things are looking like on the ground.
Thank you.
Shifting focus now to the United Kingdom, the latest on the Partygate controversy. The London police will be issuing at least 20 fixed penalty notices as part of their investigation into the illegal parties that were held at the Prime Minister's residence and office during the COVID-19 lockdown period. The Metropolitan Police has said that the investigations will continue and more so-called fixed penalty notices could be issued at a later date. These notices are the first to be issued, but those receiving them will not be named publicly. However, British media reports saying that Downing Street will confirm if the Prime Minister receives a notice. The police are investigating 12 separate events in 2020 and 2021. 6 of which are set to have been attended by the British Prime Minister. The police have reportedly obtained over 3 photographs and 500 pages of documents from the Whitehall inquiry report that was conducted by the civil servant Sue Gray. The announcement marks the first official confirmation that events at Downing Street and Whitehall broke the laws created by the Johnson government. The Partygate scandal, which emerged late last year, has sparked the most serious threat to Boris Johnson's premiership to date. His early denials and subsequent revelations have sparked calls for resignations from across the political spectrum. The 2-day nationwide strike in India by the central trade unions has entered its second day today. Banking and transport services have been partially impacted. Peaceful sit-in protests have been staged in Kerala, Tamil Nadu and Karnataka, and even at Delhi's Jantar Mantar. The trade unions are protesting against the central government's policies affecting workers, farmers. While the 2-day strike has been largely peaceful, a report in the New York Times is blowing the strike out of proportion. Let's first show you what the New York Times article has to say. The article is misleadingly titled, "General Strike Throws India into Confusion." It says, and I'm quoting, "The walkout blocked roads and train tracks and public transportation absent from the streets of many towns." It quotes an opposition politician from the Communist Party of India, Marxist, in Tamil Nadu. He says, "The present government is anti-workers and against poor people." The New York Times story also quotes a top official with the Center of Indian Trade Unions. The article quotes him complaining about the government's privatization policies. He says, and I'm quoting again, "Mr. Modi's government is changing labor laws to the detriment of workers, effectively lowering wages even amid rising inflation." Now, we cannot say if the strike actually threw India into confusion, but this New York Times article has certainly left Twitter confused. Someone said a 2-day nationwide strike in India is as visible as independent journalism in the New York Times, while some trolled the publication for simply exaggerating the situation with its unreliable reportage. But such a report is not a first for the New York Times. The publication has often been criticized for its biased and patronizing reportage on India. Whether it's India's infrastructure, middle class, or economic figures, the publication has only sold criticism of India's economic growth. In fact, in 2021, the New York Times received backlash over a job advertisement seeking a South Asia business correspondent based in New Delhi. Many Twitter users and media publications observed that the job requirement read like an op-ed, inviting anti-Hindu, anti-Modi candidates to spread propaganda. Moreover, political or cultural matters that are personal to India have also been denigrated by the New York Times. Sample this. In 2019, the New York Times had a hard time coming to terms with reality. This was after the Prime Minister's government decided to abrogate Article 370, paving the way for the greater integration of Jammu and Kashmir with India. And in 2017, the New York Times carried an article that claimed the sari to be a symbol of Hindu nationalism. These instances have compelled critics and netizens to ask if the New York Times has been as prompt in reporting about India's achievements. On to China now, where the most populous city, Shanghai, has once again tightened the first phase of a two-stage lockdown as it entered its second day of the COVID-19 curbs. Authorities there have now imposed restrictions on highway traffic and cross-river bridges as well to contain the surging COVID-19 cases. Our next report telling you more.
Shanghai entered a two-stage lockdown Monday as the financial hub of 26 million people scrambles to contain surging COVID-19 cases. The snap lockdown, which was announced on Sunday, will split the city in two, roughly along the Huangpu River for 9 days, to allow for staggered testing. It's the biggest COVID-related disruption to hit the city. While residents east of the Huangpu were confined to their homes, those in the west stockpiled groceries and other essential goods as they prepared for a similar fate starting on April 1st. This shopper at a Shanghai wet market said there's nothing left and they're at a loss for what to do. The lockdown order marks a turnaround for Shanghai's authorities, which as late as Saturday denied the city would be locked down. Shanghai's Public Security Bureau said it was closing cross-river bridges and tunnels and highway toll booths concentrated in the city's east until Friday, and people leaving the city would have to show a negative test taken within the previous 48 hours. Shanghai also ordered the suspension of work at firms and factories, exempting those offering public services or supplying food. Some hospitals also suspended services as they release staff and other resources to assist with mass testing. Shanghai said earlier this month that its daily testing capacity was around 3 million, but some doctors warned it still might not be enough to outpace the rapid spread of the virus.
On to the special report coming in from the world of technology. There is a lot of hype about flying cars. Recently, a couple of vertical takeoff and landing vehicles were awarded airworthiness certificates, which means that their makers can now eye mass manufacturing and fly them commercially, at least on a small scale. But some of the promises sound too good to be true. Flying taxis have a long way to go before they actually take off. We're leaving you with this special report. Thanks for watching.
Did you know Waldo Waterman, an American aviation pioneer, built the world's first flying automobile in 1934? As a concept, flying cars have been talked about for centuries. They have long been a staple of science fiction. But now, after years of hype, real-life electric flying cars, not just prototypes, may soon hit the skies. German startup Volocopter plans to launch electric air taxis in Singapore in 2024. Australian firms have placed orders for 90 electric aircraft from Embraer's electric aircraft subsidiary Eve. Klein Vision's air car has been issued a certificate of airworthiness by the Slovak Transport Authority, meaning it has the official okay to fly around in its home country. Morgan Stanley analysts estimate the potential market for electric vertical takeoff and landing vehicles could be worth $1 trillion by 2040. Well-established aviation and automotive industry players are betting big on urban mobility, but there are several roadblocks they must overcome. When it comes to flying vehicles, one of the biggest challenges is the battery that powers them. You can't power them with today's automotive batteries, which are designed for ground transport. Batteries for flying cars need to be very high energy density so that they can stay aloft in the air for a good amount of time.
If somebody comes up with a battery which has a high enough density of energy per kilogram, we are happy to implement such an engine in our flying car. So I'm sure somebody will come up with some improvements of the battery technology, but at this moment, unfortunately, the range would be too small.
They also need very high power during the vertical takeoff and landing. Weight is also a consideration for these batteries. Also, these futuristic taxis will be making multiple trips in a day to be profitable. They need batteries that can quickly recharge. Until the batteries are made more viable, a widespread rollout of flying taxis is unlikely in the near future. Another concern around flying electric cars is the pilot workforce. McKinsey estimates that electric vertical takeoff and landing vehicle operators will need to attract and train roughly 60,000 pilots by 2028. It equates to 7% of all commercial pilots in 2018. This is an important challenge, but much less discussed than other issues associated with urban air mobility. According to analysts, there is a need to drive down costs of these flying cars so that they serve as more than just a quieter helicopter replacement for the ultra-wealthy. Noise is another critical issue. There are fears flying vehicles will increase noise levels over cities. And then there are the infrastructure challenges. A host of new regulations and policies are required to ensure the safety of everyone, whether these vehicles are in the sky or on the ground.